You know, while I said above that Star Wars envy was industry-wide, there was one actor I knew who was completely and utterly unaffected by all things Star Wars. I'm jumping forward a bit here, but you'll see why in a moment. It's a wonderful story. Now, does the name Sebastian Shaw mean anything to you? It will to some, but probably not to the majority. Well, Sebastian Shaw was one of the most eminent British stage and film actors of the mid-20th century. He was with the Royal Shakespeare Company for eons. He had studied drama with the great Charles Laughton, and was an awfully good-looking chap. The ladies and men just flew at him. In the late spring of 1983, I was in London's West End, and in a rather chipper mood when all of a sudden I saw Sebastian and his wife sitting on a bench. Incidentally, Sebastian's wife was none other than Joan Ingpen, the lady who discovered Luciano Pavarotti. "Hello, you two," I said. "What are you up to?" Now, I'd known Sebastian since the mid-1960s, and saw him quite often back then. He looked as pleased to see me as I was him. "Brian," he cried, "just enjoying the good weather. How are you, dear boy?" "I'm marvellous, thanks," I beamed. "Just on my way to buy a ticket for Return of the Jedi." This seemed to mean something to Sebastian, which I have to say surprised me somewhat. "Is that the new Star Wars film?" he asked. "Yes, that's right," I said, although I have to confess, Sebastian, I wouldn't have put you down as a fan. "Ah, he's not," piped up Joan. "He can't stand all that nonsense. You're in the film, though, aren't you, dear?" "Oh, yes, I am," said Sebastian vaguely. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're in the new Star Wars film, Return of the Jedi?" "Apparently," said Sebastian. I had to sit down. "But I only saw you a couple of months ago. I mean, why didn't you tell me?" "Why on earth would I, dear boy? It's only a film, and besides, we're all sworn to secrecy, so I wouldn't have been allowed to tell you. I assume it'll be okay now. What an exhausting experience, though. Do you know what time they picked me up? 3 a.m., and I was in makeup for hours, and then they dressed me in some awfully elaborate black armour costume and made me lie on my back all day. I'm afraid I kept on nodding off." "Was this up at Elstree?" "Yes, that's right. Elstree Studios." By this time I was an emotional wreck, flitting between extreme excitement and pure jealousy. "But what part did you play?" I asked. I'm afraid my question seemed to confound Sebastian somewhat. "Oh, goodness," he said, looking perplexed. "It was a strange name. Dark something or other." I was at a loss. "It must have been a new character," I said. "I can't think of anyone in Star Wars called Dark." Then all of a sudden it clicked. "Surely you don't mean Darth Vader?" "You can't be." "That's it," he said, sitting up with a jolt. "Darth Vader. I knew it was something like that." I couldn't bloody believe it. "Sebastian," I said, "you do realize every actor in the world would give his right arm to be the face of Darth Vader? In fact, I'd have given my life. You're in Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi. The entire world cannot wait to see this film, and you've got the role of Vader." Sebastian still wasn't impressed. "Really, Brian?" he said. "I'm glad I didn't know all this beforehand. Otherwise, I'd have been terrified." He had no idea that he had made history. How on earth did George Lucas find that face? To think he picked a star from the 1940s and 1950s. Amazing! And despite Sebastian not really knowing what day it was, he gives a really marvellous performance. Inspired casting.